Hey folks, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is my co-host Danny Gillette, and we're back here on a Thursday morning. It's another big day for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. The men's basketball team will be on the road tonight against Ohio State, and the Nebraska football team is setting up official visits left and right. So we're going
Yep.
to cover all that. Before we do, please make sure that you guys hit the like button on this video. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button. It definitely helps us out. So Danny, before we get to the Huskers, man, how you doing this morning?
Good. I'm excited for the game tonight, the basketball game, and it's not going to be an easy one. No big time basketball game is, but other than that, I'm doing pretty good. Spring is coming. I'm feeling a lot of warmer weather, so I'm optimistic about that. And just 1 month closer to football, so I'm always happy, and even closer to spring practice, believe it or not. So things are looking up.
Yeah, things definitely are looking up. As we talk about, Nebraska and Ohio State. Yeah, definitely not going to be an easy matchup tonight. The Huskers are a 3-point underdog. That game will be on Fox Sports 1. It's going to tip off 5:30 p.m. Central Time. So we're going to get into that in just a moment, talk some Nebraska basketball. But we're going to get off the show started with some of the football recruiting stuff going on because, man, if you haven't been following, it's been hard to keep track of all the visits. It seems like there's like 5 or 6 guys a day setting up not just unofficial visits but official visits in April and June. So a lot of big time recruits, and you can really see the board kind of stacking up for Nebraska. And what are some of the who are some of the names, or what are some of the visits that are kind of sticking out to you so far, Danny?
Jalen Williams, because I know the defensive lineman, four-star defensive lineman out of Palatine. He visited Nebraska once before already. He liked Nebraska when he was offered in January. And then also, I mean, I've talked about him before, wide receiver Cortez Mills. He's coming in on June 14th, I believe it is. And he is a highly sought after wide receiver. It seems like every program wants him. And as always is the case with Florida wide receivers, you got to watch out for, Miami and Florida State and the like. And so I guess I said I had a question I wanted to ask you before we got on here. Michigan also seems to be a player for Jalen Williams. And how much do you think Michigan is involved in his recruitment?
I still think Michigan is definitely involved. They lost Mike Elston, who was kind of the primary recruiter, their defensive line coach, and Jalen Williams kind of tweeted about that. He actually put out a tweet when Mike Elston went to the Chargers. So I do think that did shake up the recruitment a little bit. They have hired a new defensive line coach. It hasn't been announced yet, but it's Greg Scruggs from Wisconsin, and he was at Cincinnati for a while with the Jets. So he's a pretty good recruiter. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a slam dunk, but it definitely that the departure of Elston definitely reset this recruitment. And even though I think the On3 prediction machine still has Michigan as the leader, but I wouldn't buy that at all. I think this is definitely more of a 50-50 thing. And Nebraska, they got Jalen Williams on campus in late January, and that seemed to go really well. Now he's got an official visit set up. So I would say that Nebraska's right there with Michigan, if not in the lead for Jalen Williams, who's 6'5", 238, out of Illinois. Just a really good player that I would be very excited about getting. And then another guy, on that June 21st weekend that I wanted to bring up, Jamarian Parker. We've talked about him before, the Arkansas running back commit at a Cardinal Ritter prep in St. Louis, Missouri. And this is one I really think Nebraska can flip. Not only I think this might be his first visit, but if you look at Arkansas right now, Sam Pittman barely avoided getting fired last year. Like a lot of people thought he was going to get fired. And so, I mean, we've seen that, with Scott Frost and just other coaches. It's hard to, sometimes get those recruits to stay in your class when, the coach is going to get fired. And so if things don't start well for Arkansas this year, especially, I think that, Jamarian Parker's just begging to be flipped. And the fact that he's taking, you don't always see guys that are committed take official visits elsewhere. I mean, you do see it sometimes, but more often than not, it feels like when that happens, they end up flipping. I mean, an official visit is one thing. Sometimes guys will go for like a junior day or like a camp thing, or and so then you kind of get a little bit worried. But some programs do not allow their commits to take official visits elsewhere. That's because when that happens, it's pretty serious. And so I don't know that Jamarian Parker's visiting anywhere else, but the fact that he's committed to Arkansas and coming to Nebraska in June, I think it's a pretty good sign for the Huskers.
And then another date that kind of caught my attention on the recruiting calendar, so to speak, is April 26th. They have a bunch of visitors coming in that day, headlined by athlete Michael Terry, four-star athlete. Again, on three recruiting prediction machine, I like to use it just to see what other teams are in play in terms of recruiting. It seems like Texas and Nebraska are kind of the two top teams in his recruitment. I like Nebraska's chances here because of their success in Texas. It's not going to be an easy recruitment for Nebraska to win because of Texas's recent, resurgence and, kind of, national spotlight type of season that they had last year. Jack Lang is also coming in on the 26th of April. Notre Dame is thought to be a contender for him. And with the way they develop offensive linemen, that's one that Nebraska's going to have to really work at as well. And then two other names that really kind of interested me. TJ Latif, the quarterback from Lutheran High School in Orange County, and Emmanuel Choice, the wide receiver from Lancaster, Texas. I kind of like where we stand with Latif and Choice because it seems as though Arizona's the other big player in his recruitment. Not that there aren't more because he's a very good quarterback, but I like where Nebraska stands with Latif. And given how Nebraska's been able to recruit and develop wide receivers, I really kind of like where we stand with Choice as well. USC is obviously, no program to sleep on when it comes to a recruiting battle, of course, but I'm not counting us out there either. And then I guess I know I said two, but one other guy, Keelan Abrams from DeSoto. I believe Mario Buford went to DeSoto, if I'm not mistaken, and TCU is the other player in his recruitment. But I also like where Nebraska stands there as well. So I guess I like pretty much everybody that Nebraska has on that day. But I'm looking at April 26th as a day, not necessarily for commitments, but one that they could really make some inroads in with some big-time recruits.
And it'll be interesting to see who else they get that weekend because that is the weekend of the spring game for Nebraska football. So
Yep, that's
that
right.
that they made that a big a big visit weekend last weekend. And yeah, Jack Lang is interesting because he also, according to On3, is going to be visiting unofficially on March 24th. So man, if you get that guy on campus, twice within a month, that's
Yeah.
a pretty good sign. He's supposed to visit the same day Chase Lofton, who's going to be taking an unofficial visit that day. And yeah, Michael Terry, you mentioned him, but yeah, 6'3", 210 pounds. This guy's ranked on three, has him 29th overall in their industry rankings. The 24/7 composite has him 52, but he's as highly ranked probably as anybody, Nebraska is going to be seriously involved with this cycle. So that's a name I definitely would keep on my eye on. And Emmanuel Choice, out of Lancaster, that's where Keyone Lacey was from. Obviously, I know he ended up going to Alabama, but Garrett McGuire, I feel like, has a good chance to get him. And I just like the receivers, man. I really, if I could choose one wide receiver in this class, it would be Cortez Mills. I said that before. I absolutely love
Yeah.
his game.
Yep.
And 6'1", 170, but it's going to be a very tough pull for him. But I am excited that they've got him in for an official visit. And the fact that, this is a receiver that from Florida that maybe I wouldn't give Nebraska a great chance at landing maybe in the past, but you've got Dylan Raiola now. So that opens up, entirely new worlds of players for you. So, and then Nebraska has done well in Florida. Of course, they did lose Phil Simpson, but I don't think that that's going to make a huge difference. I am interested to see, though, if he can kind of get Florida State more involved in that Cortez Mills recruitment because it's been mostly dominated by Miami and South Florida. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all the guys that I was really, kind of looking at. Isaiah West, another guy running back out of, Philadelphia. So two running backs that have official visits, Isaiah West and Jamarian Parker. Wisconsin and Penn State also very much in the mix there. So just kind of interesting because you can see how things are, developing as far as the board goes, who's getting these official visits. And you can see who Nebraska football is prioritizing. And I think they've got a pretty impressive list of recruits for official visits so far.
I'm interested in the Keelan Abrams commitment because if they can land another player from DeSoto, I'd say that's a school that they really, really start, kind of making a priority in recruiting. And, DeSoto is known for producing quality players, so I'd be perfectly fine with that. And then One other name that kind of caught my eye, as if all of these don't catch my eye because I love recruiting, is they're hosting Dawson Merritt, the linebacker, on April 13th. Kansas and Nebraska seem to be the top two in his recruitment so far, according to the prediction machine. So you never know with that, but I like our chances here. 4-star linebacker, 18th overall at the position, 4th overall in the state, and you can never have too many linebackers, especially in this Tony White defense. And so he's a guy that I'm kind of interested in. 6'3", 205 pounds. Ranked 128th overall nationally. I mean, I think that's a recruitment worth keeping an eye on as well, especially if Kansas State is really kind of one of the other schools that are really, really in the mix, because I feel like we can win a recruitment there.
Yeah, and right now Nebraska is the only team with an official visit. They've had 3 visits actually, because he's coming in April too, April and June, and he did visit last September. So he's only other visited, at least according to On3, and this might not always be updated, but Iowa State, Kansas. It'll be interesting to see if other programs do get in the mix. Florida State has offered this guy scholarship. I'm sure a bunch of others have too. But Nebraska's done a really great job of getting these guys, the top players in Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska, and Iowa, really that cluster of kind of Midwest schools. Nebraska's done a great job of at least getting in the mix with almost all of the best players in those areas. So, I mean, those are the types of recruiting battles Nebraska should be able to win. They should be able to beat Iowa and Kansas State and Kansas out for recruits. I mean, traditionally they've been able to do that. And like, the last few years, maybe it's been a struggle because the on-field results haven't been as good. But, this program is starting to, recruit like it should. And that's a top 20 class every year. I think that's what Nebraska can do on the recruiting trail. And I think, Matt Rule's he pretty much got us there day one. He signed a top 25 class his first year with very limited time. Top
2
20
weeks.
class. Yeah, 2 weeks.
Around, yeah.
Signed a top 20 class last cycle and closed really strong again. And they're off to a very positive start right now. I know they've only got a few commitments, but and they're doing a good job with in-state recruits too. A couple of names that, outside of Chase Lofton and Christian Jones, but guys I think that will be deciding fairly soon. Jackson Carpenter is one of those guys. He's been down to Nebraska and Kansas. He's got, crystal balls for Nebraska. I believe he's going to be a Nebraska, commit in the end. But that's another one to watch. Pierce Mooberry is another guy that has visited recently, linebacker, athlete. So those are 2 guys that are basically top 8 players in the state, according to 24/7, and Nebraska's in a good spot to land both of those guys too.
So how do you think the recruitment of Cortez Mills affects the recruitment of Isaiah Mosey? Because he was another guy that I really liked, and he could still be I don't want to say backup plan, because that's unfair to him. But do you think Nebraska pushes as hard for Isaiah Mosey still?
I think they will. I haven't heard as much about him lately.
I haven't either. That's why I asked.
Yeah, let's see. And he's also ranked very high. If I look at 24/7, his teams that are listed as warmer: Missouri, Oklahoma, Oregon, Tennessee. I feel like maybe, he's got official visits to Missouri. Let's see, he's taking a visit to Tennessee. I mean, I think that he would still have a chance. It does seem like that they, I don't know, for some reason aren't, recruiting him as much. They've shifted to some of these other, some of these receivers in Texas. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they came back to him, but it does seem like, Cortez Mills has kind of been the top priority, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they don't feel like they can land both guys.
Right.
I'm not really sure. I don't necessarily think that's their thinking, because they are going after, some other highly ranked receivers. But yeah, I'm not sure why there's been a drop off with Mosey. Maybe they just didn't feel it, didn't feel any positive momentum going forward. But it is interesting that he hasn't, taken an official visit or, been scheduled for an official one either.
And it's important to remember, just generally speaking, that recruiting is now a year-round thing. It's no longer just, February, December, and done. It is now a round-the-clock 365, or if you're counting today, 366 day job. And so I used to be a lot more worried about where classes stand at this point in the year. Now with the transfer portal and everything, I'm not really that worried. but I do think Nebraska has a solid base for the 25 class, and I've been really impressed with how aggressive they've been, and I think it's going to kind of really, they kind of did this last year, get all their recruiting done by, say, July, kind of sit back, play the season, get everybody signed, and kind of round out the class very early, which I liked, and it wasn't something that we were used to. But I saw something the other day, and I'm not sure if you've seen this, where the NCAA was kind of considering a third signing day. What do you think about that? I don't know if I like that, but
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I mean, that is interesting. It's kind of they're talking about revamping the recruiting calendar a little bit. So they would add the proposal, or at least some of the talk, I don't think it's a proposal yet, is for having a third signing day in June. And then you would have a signing day in December, but it would be the Wednesday after the Wednesday before the conference championship game. So it wouldn't
which I
be,
don't like, but
yeah, I mean, I can see it. I guess I can see it both ways, for coaches, but yeah, it is a little bit different. So that would be earlier, and then the rest of December, I guess, would be a dead period, and so you would be somewhat separating. I think you would have high school recruiting done before you would have the transfer portal opening, I think is the idea.
oh,
Um, and I think part of the reason, I do think, at least in what I was reading and some of the things, is that they're trying to, maybe give teams a chance to focus on those high school recruits. And so you'd have give kids a chance to sign in June and some in December. Now, I don't know how many would sign in June. I mean, Nebraska's got like 5 or 6 commits now. So, I mean, you could get some. I'm sure there would be a push to sign more if that happened. But I do think you'd have to change the calendar a little bit too, because if you have guys signing before, they go into their senior season, it would make sense to allow them to take, official visits as juniors and game day visits, because they can't take those until they're seniors, really. So that would be, I think they need to change some of that stuff. And then the normal February period would be the same. But I don't know. June does seem a little weird. Does seem a little early to me. Like, maybe I don't know why they don't do it in August, because it seems like by August there's a good, you have a pretty good idea of, like, at least some of the top players where they're going. They've taken their visits in June, and that late period in July, that's not a dead period. So I feel like probably like 80 or 90% of the kids that want to, make their decisions could sign in August, and then you'd have a few left in December and February. But it'll be interesting to follow. I don't know how much it's going to, impact things from a Nebraska, perspective. I don't think it's going to dramatically change things. It's just, it would just be a lot different calendar, and it would just move things up even more, which the early signing period, that kind of moved up decisions even farther. So it's just going to, advance decision-making processes for kids even more, I think.
I feel like having early signing day the week of the conference championship game is a little bit hectic. I don't know if I like
Yeah,
that.
if you're playing that week, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if true. Yeah, I don't know if I like that. It's just a lot all at once. I mean, but and it also all like the June signing period allows more tampering, and I don't know. I don't know if I like that. To me, it just seems like I get why the NCAA wants to do it, but to me, it seems like classic NCAA try to fix a problem where there is none. While meanwhile, like NIL and everything is going crazy, and they're doing nothing about it, and I don't know. Just seems kind of. I don't like it, but if it happens, it happens. I mean, college football is now radically different than what it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah, that would be a pretty big change. I'm not, the summer period is surprising to me, but I guess the only thing is, if you're going to make December like a true dead period, then coaches wouldn't really be recruiting, I guess, going into that conference championship
True.
week. It would pretty much, I mean, they'd be doing phone calls, but because you can you can use text. I don't know if you can call. I know you can text. You probably can, but who calls people anymore? Everybody texts. So they probably don't even want
I
coaches.
don't.
They're probably like, "Who the hell is this coach calling me, man? I'm not going there." But and then and then pretty much on that Wednesday, you just be collecting your letters of intent. But yeah, it would be a hectic week. Although it would be, if you weren't playing in that championship game, I guess it wouldn't matter as much. But you would have teams, excuse me, that are going to be preparing for, the 12-team playoff and whatnot. So at any rate,
And Nebraska will be one of them. So Matt Rule is going to have a hectic week ahead of him, hopefully.
yeah,
Hectic couple weeks if this passes.
when we go 10-2 this year, which I do think is possible.
I saw 9-3 projections the other day. So
It's possible. But at any rate, we do have, this Nebraska basketball team has been on a roll, 4 straight wins of over by 15 points or more. They're playing an Ohio State team tonight that they beat in January in Lincoln, 83-69. Like we mentioned at the top of the show, though, they're a 3-point underdog. And this Ohio State team, since they fired their head coach and not hired, but installed Jake Diebler as the interim head coach, they beat Purdue at home. They beat Michigan State on the road. So they have kind of turned things around. They're still like 58th in the Ken Palm, and they're going to be going to the NIT. The NIT is kind of different now, where the top I think 2 teams, like in the Big Ten Conference, that aren't selected to the NCAA tournament get automatic berths. So I think last year probably would have helped Nebraska because there was rumors of the Big Ten and some of these other teams starting their own postseason tournament. So the NIT kind of, got away from, we're going to auto bid the small conference champions. But at any rate, long story short, Ohio State is going to be playing in the NIT, and, they have a strong run going into the postseason. Nebraska obviously they're basically off the bubble in terms of the projections. They're up to an 8 seed right now, according to Jill Lenardi, but things can change quickly. And this game is huge for them because, as we mentioned, Wisconsin lost earlier this week. So Nebraska is in 4th place right now in the Big Ten. If they win out, they will get the double bye, and they will get a double bye into the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament. So this is a huge game for the Nebraska Cornhuskers tonight. What are your thoughts about it?
my thoughts is that the last name Diebler sounded familiar, and then I realized that Jake Diebler was the younger brother of John Diebler, who I remember playing at Ohio State. So those are my thoughts. But I think this is going to be another big game. This is going to be another big game where defense is going to be crucial once again. And I thought Sunday against Minnesota, they did a good job of not only guarding but rotating, and they did a good job of diving for loose balls, making the hustle plays. I thought over the past couple games they've paid a lot more attention to detail in terms of rebounding the basketball as well, and they've also done a better job of involving everybody in the offense. And I feel like that they've been able to move the basketball and they've been able to rebound at a better level. And so those are 2 things that have really keyed their success over the past couple weeks. And then, the play of Casey Tominaga along with Bryce Williams have really been solid over the past couple games. And so I'd love to see them, contribute at a high level tonight. And it's not just the fact that, Casey's scoring points. It's how he's scoring them. He's been a lot more efficient. He's been a lot more smart when it comes to his shots. Sure, he'll chuck up a 3 that just barely grazes the rim, but overall, by and large, he's done a much better job of moving without the basketball. And then Williams is a nice kind of throwback player a little bit, right? He loves those mid-range shots, and that's been his bread and butter. So it's been really good to see him. Kind of step up over the past couple of weeks. I'd say it started in particular in the overtime loss against Illinois at the beginning of this month. And, and then I'll toss it over to you. An overall point here, just what a difference a healthy Juan Gary makes. Nebraska didn't have him last year healthy, and, he was sorely missed. And now that he's healthy, he's probably been, one of their best players over the past couple of weeks or so. So he's really been able to provide, a solid, consistent scorer every night, and it's given Nebraska kind of a triple threat, almost a quadruple threat in terms of offense. And so everything's clicking right now. It's kind of, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And Nebraska's found a formula right now between the rebounding, the scoring from everybody, and, limiting the turnovers and overall perimeter defense that's really kind of helped key their success over the past couple weeks.
Yeah, defense has been the key, and I think that's going to be a key again tonight. And when I look at Ohio State, they're a very talented team, overall. And then, I mean, they've got six guys that were top 100 recruits on their roster, and they actually none of them are ranked outside of the top 69, and three of those guys are in the rotation tonight. Now, some of them don't play a ton, but Bruce Thornton is a dynamic scorer. He's one of the best scorers in the Big Ten, 16 points a game. Jamison Battle, who transferred from Minnesota, I think he's
Yeah,
been battling some injuries, so I'm not 100% sure. I think he did miss a game recently.
no pun intended.
Yeah, Zed Key is a guy that didn't play in the first matchup, the 6'8" forward, and he's just kind of a glue guy. Doesn't put up huge numbers, but is important on the boards. And then Roddy Gale, another 6'4" guard. And I'm just, looking at this lineup that they have been playing with, kind of Tominaga at the one per se, even though he's, not doing all the point guard duties. I'm just wondering how they're going to, that probably means Tominaga is going to have to guard, Bruce Thornton for some of this game. And then, Roddy Gale, 6'4", that would either be, probably Gary or Bryce Williams. I mean, obviously Sam Hoiberg is going to come in, Jamarcus Lawrence, those guys are going to check those guys a lot too. So this is just going to be interesting to see how they, adjust their personnel, because the guards are going to be, a big factor in this game. Ohio State does have size. Felix, Okpara inside, a 6'11" big guy, and they average about almost 5 blocks a game, so 4.7 blocks per game. So that's one thing that Ohio State does do well in terms of their defense. And then, but another thing is they don't really force a lot of turnovers. They don't force a lot of turnovers, and they don't want teams to shoot a lot of 3-pointers, which is understandable because their 3-point defense percentage wise ranks 320th in college basketball. The caveat, though, is that they only allow teams to shoot 19 threes a game, which is 48. So that's kind of where you get into this matchup of like Ohio State wants you to, shoot the tough twos, and Nebraska wants to shoot the open threes. So that's where, it's offense versus defense. But Fred Hoiberg's offense is very good, and he's always run very good stuff. I think he runs as good a stuff as any coach in the Big Ten, to be honest with you, just in terms of, play sets. I mean, the way that he's been able to utilize Rink Mass this year, like he did Derek Walker, and finding stuff for Casey, and he's just such a smart coach offensively that I'm not worried about. Now, I think Nebraska will get the shots that it wants. It always does. It's just about hitting those threes, basically hitting the 3-pointers, not turning the ball over a ton, and then just playing solid defense. And one thing that is really interesting, I know that a lot of Nebraska fans don't want to, they hate the hype, right? Because we're so sick of hearing the offseason championship stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I know this team has never won an NCAA tournament game, but I just want to point this out that, if you look at teams that have won national championships in college basketball, basically since the era of the Ken Palm rankings, no team has done it. Every team that's won a national championship has had a top 40 adjusted offense and a top 25 adjusted defense. So Nebraska, their adjusted offense already in the top 40 is 39th. Their adjusted defense is 32nd. So Nebraska's defense is actually ranked higher than its offense. So if that number got a little bit farther down, seven more rankings down, Nebraska would be in that formula of a team that, according to the Ken Palm rankings, can win a national championship. So this is a legitimate team. This might be the best team Nebraska's ever had, at least dating back to like 1991 or the 93 team that won the Big 12 tournament. But so we're seeing levels of Nebraska basketball that we literally haven't seen in about 3 decades.
And, you have to think that this helps recruiting as well. I mean, Fred's always been a good recruiter, and now I think that's going to even really be more the case as, teams take stock of what Nebraska's doing, and, they get more praise, on these network shows and on the TV. I mean, John Beilein had a ton of praise for Nebraska on Sunday. And so I saw this poll on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. And that said, which would you want more, a Big Ten tournament win or an NCAA tournament game win? And for me, I think it would have to be an NCAA tournament game win.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, it would definitely have to be the NCAA tournament, winning a tournament game, which Nebraska's has not done. One of the few teams, and I think probably the only team in Power 5 college basketball that hasn't won an NCAA tournament game. I could be wrong about that, but there's not many. And you look at this matchup tonight too. Ohio State in the NET rankings, 65th. So this would be a quad 1 victory for Nebraska tonight. So you look at their number 8 seed right now. You go in and win this game, you got a chance to jump up another seed liners. I mean, this team could be, a 6 or 7 seed by the time that they get to the NCAA tournament if they keep winning. But they also could lose very easily. I mean, this is a tough
Mm-hmm.
game. Michigan has been terrible this year, but they almost beat Purdue at home last Saturday. So going to Ann Arbor is not going to be a guaranteed win. I do feel pretty good about the Rutgers game at home, but I could easily see Nebraska losing 2 of these next 3 games. It's very possible. So it's nothing is a guarantee in this conference. You got to come out every night, play well, especially on the road. We've seen that. So what's your prediction tonight? Let's get to the prediction time. Nebraska at Ohio State, 5:30 p.m. Central Time, Fox Sports 1. Huskers are a 3-point underdog. Who you got, Danny?
I have, let's see, Nebraska 75, Ohio State 67.
Going with the Huskers. I agree. I think it's going to be, I'm going to say Nebraska 78, Ohio State 72. Very similar to what you got. I think Nebraska is going to win the game at the 3-point line. I think they're going to win the game with their defense. Obviously 72 points is more than we've seen them give up against some other teams, but Bruce Thornton and those guys are very good offensively. I think the defense is still going to be good enough. And yeah, I think it's going to be tight, but I'm going to go with the Huskers. And if they get this win, then I definitely think a win tonight clinches their spot in the NCAA tournament. Like there is no
I think they're
worry if
already
they
in.
win this game. I think they
I
are
think they're
too.
already in, honestly, in my opinion.
I
I
think
think
they
they,
are, but I guess my worry is like
yeah,
what if you lose these 3 games and then lose the Big Ten tournament game? Like you lose 4 in a row, maybe you're like a first 4 team in. But yeah,
yeah.
as long as they don't do that, I feel like they're guaranteed in. And if they can win this one, then there is no concern on Selection Sunday. The only worry will be how high does the sea go. So that'll be a different place for Nebraska basketball to be. Is
Mm.
looking forward to their seeding instead of are we going to make the tournament or the NIT?
And you talk about a full program rebuild from the bottom up. Coach Hoiberg has really, gone from a terrible program to making a program that's now in the NCAA tournament talk. I mean, you wanna kind of find a picture in the dictionary for a term rebuild. This is the program that you would find, I think.
Yeah, and it's just I mean, getting to 20 wins. I mean, 2 years ago when they won like 9 games, like this did not look like it was going to work. And I mean, it's just so to go from 7 wins his first 2 years, and 24 wins his first 3 seasons. They could surpass that this year. I mean, they could surpass their win total of his first 3 seasons this year. So, I mean, I feel like Nebraska, I've said this before, but I feel like we're like about to embark on a Danny Need level of Nebraska basketball, where he got this team to the tournament a bunch in the early 90s, late 80s. And I feel like we're about to have, a bunch of 20-win seasons in a row under Fred Hoiberg. So I think the future is extremely bright for Nebraska basketball, for Nebraska women's basketball, who's also going to be in the tournament, and Nebraska football. So
Yeah, I
it's
feel
just,
like we're entering a golden age here, a new golden age of Husker
yeah.
athletics, so we can finally all stop talking about the 90s.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah,
I
I know you're sick of it. That's all we got right now is
am.
the
I
'90s,
am.
man.
So, but I feel like we're
Eric
turning the corner.
Kwiatkowski.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like we're turning the corner, and shout out to Trev Alberts for making a tough decision to put his support behind Coach Hoiberg when things were not going so well. Shout out to Trev Alberts for hiring Matt Rule, and I know some people were kind of apprehensive about the Alberts extension. I loved it, and I still do. I think this is the right guy to lead us into the future, and I think the future overall for many of the athletic programs is very bright.
Yeah, I mean, volleyball's killing it. You look at
Yeah.
wrestling is the number
Yep.
3 team. So I mean, those are like you look at volleyball, women's basketball, wrestling, football. I mean, those are probably the 5 biggest sports, and then you got baseball and softball are right there too, and they're very
Baseball's
competitive.
got a nice win a couple
Yeah.
days ago.
And I mean, softball they just beat a top 25 team. Obviously, they'd be I think a contender for the national title if they had Jordy Ball, at least as one of the teams in the mix, probably a top 15 team. So I mean, yeah, you look at every probably top program that Nebraska really truly invests in, they're pretty good at, and I feel like Trev Alberts is doing a spectacular job, and Nebraska fans just need to be thankful for him. I mean, look at the volleyball game outside. I mean, he does so many great things for these athletes, and I just think he gets it. He gets what it takes to be Nebraska. He understands what it means and how important it is, and he's he's the right guy to lead the athletic department, and he's put the right people in place to lead all of our top programs. So feel good about where the Huskers are, and thanks everybody for hanging out with our show. We'll wrap it up there, but make sure that you guys like the video, subscribe. We'll be back with a Saturday morning chat. We haven't had one of those in a couple of weeks, but for all of our hardcore Husker fans, come join us on Saturday. We'll talk some spring ball, Nebraska basketball, whatever you guys fancy. So make sure you support the channel. We definitely appreciate it. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.